transformation, systems change. We're, again, both of us operate in the same field in our own ways. And I'd love to get your insights on two common barriers in the transformation process, especially when we're talking about like large scale organizations or institutions, some of which have very long held structural constraints, but also the human factor that's present, whether we're talking about egos or funding. And the two ones that I feel I come up against a lot are the mindset. So this excellence that you bring, I would describe or paraphrase it as being able to see the forest and the trees, right? I see the network, I see the nodes. And you're flexible in terms of the movement within that space and the design of a system that ultimately meets certain goals. That is not second nature to everybody. And in the organizations that we work with at times, there can be very defined silos. So this is my node. This is my slice of the pie. This is what I focus on. How do you navigate those moments where, and those, because I would imagine you confront them quite early on in your collaborations with people, right? Because it's like, who do I meet with? And then you meet with people here, but then it's like, oh, but you got to meet, but then all these other, there's all these other silos we have to account for in the decision-making process. How have you broached that at times constraint in the transformation process?
Yeah, so twofold, I think. One is growth mindset. Organizations that invest in the development and the nurturing of growth mindset, I think that is a core element, and actually the one element that if I point to, those organizations that can do innovation well really embrace that growth mindset. And so what does that look like? Well, it's looking at it from the perspective of a yes and, believing that we have the opportunity to continuously learn and continuously adapt. And that in this moment of risk, because change is risk, but in this moment of risk, that we believe that abundance will come from it. And so we don't think of it from a constraint perspective, but rather that we are building something that will eventually be better. And also recognizing that innovation and change is an iterative process. It isn't a destination in and of itself. It's actually why I love the horizon as the metaphor for this, because as we journey to the horizon, right, it's going to keep moving. And that's okay. That's actually like the life journey that we all get to take. And the joy of living is something where we are continuously evolving and innovating, because that's life. But so in addition to growth mindset, so that's fundamentally about culture and building out those and continuously investing in that culture of the organization. But when we think about it from a pragmatic perspective, because not everyone's going to be able to come for the journey, and that's okay. It's okay within our organizations that sometimes there are those who are going to do the day-to-day work that we need to have done. But one of the ways that change can happen, and doing so in a way that really empowers an organization to move forward, is to practice an erecting up beside, so that we continue with some of our traditional efforts, but erect beside those some of those change initiatives, so that we can give everyone an opportunity to feel safe within our organizations, because that safety within the organization is so important for everyone to feel that they can contribute in the way that they can contribute. And so those are the two key pieces. One is the culture and growth mindset. And two is the opportunity to create innovations that stand beside some of those traditional legacy opportunities that continue to exist within an organization. That's not always easy to do, but sometimes it helps the organization continue to move forward, and that's the important part. Because over time, what we're able to demonstrate to those who may be a little bit more skeptical about change is that risk was worth taking, and that the organization has responded to maybe failures or the need to iterate and adapt, and how the organization has positively responded, leveraging that growth mindset example to move forward. And that's very important as we demonstrate and continuously provide evidence to our teams that the change and the innovation is actually something to embrace.
I mean, and this is neurobiological, right? I mean, education 101 is you give a learner what they can do so that they have success in something, and then you build and you scaffold on top of it, right?
Exactly.
People need to see the success that's happening. And this is the balancing act, right? Because you're articulating culture cultures that can embrace longer term transformative processes, right? Like you're investing in a process, it's messy, it's going to take time. And you can go into an organization and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, 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 that's super. I'm going to get I'm going to get super defensive about that. I'm going to be so scared about that. Right. So what you do so intelligently is you're breaking that down, that process down, and making it safer.
Yeah.
So that I'm not going to take your silo away. I'm going to build a communal space, a common place where we can come and work together. So you feel, right? So there's that kind of acclimatization. What are the methods that as an organization, as a company, Microsoft does that you would say supports that culture shift? Because I find that culture shift is often left to internal bodies. And then because of some of those structural constraints, because we're used to working separately, if someone inside an organization tries to bring too many people together, it can be seen, it can not work sometimes. But having an external person kind of come in and try to promote, quote unquote, these culture shifts. So not necessarily coming in and introducing a technology, but programs that you've identified at Microsoft work to support building a growth mindset within an organization's employee base, for example. Are there examples that you could offer us in terms of things that you do that help?
Yeah. Absolutely. So, growth mindset is core to our culture at Microsoft, and it is something from all the way from Satya Nadella to the very front lines of our organization. We all live and breathe and nurture and protect our growth mindset culture that we have. It's core as an innovation company that we live this internally so that we can empower others. Because at the end of the day, for us, this is all about how do we empower every single person, every single organization on the planet to achieve more? Well, that means living that growth mindset, learning together, being learn-it-alls, not know-it-alls. I love that mantra that we have because it pervades everything in the way that we do work. So we do a lot of our work with coalitions of the willing who come together to push forward and to innovate and to create together. And it's everything from the day-to-day work that we do to when we get the opportunity to join our annual hackathon. We also get training on growth mindset so that we are remembering, and this is something that we undertake regularly, so that we are understanding and bringing to the forefront and continuously investing in our skills to continue to grow as humans. And so not only do we then think about how do we nurture each other to grow in our professional capacities and grow those skill sets, but also in how do we show up and be our best selves, and how do we live a way that we get to live that mission then. And so, I think it's that way of doing work. And also being able to recognize that when the company does innovate and we experience failure, what is that failure? Well, it's not actually a failure. It's that we tried something and it didn't work. Now we need to learn from it, and then we need to adapt. And so it's a different mindset. It's a different mindset. When you think about failure, you think of an endpoint, and then you have to pick yourself back up again, dust yourself off, and try again. But when we think about trying something and it didn't work, and what did we learn from it, and what are we going to do differently now? How are we going to adapt? It's an adaptive mentality, and it's adaptive mindset. And it's that adaptive mindset that helps really energize that experience of finding the courage, but importantly recognizing that you don't necessarily need to be so brave because you're not alone.
Yeah.
Have your coalition with you and you're learning together. And that is a very different way of looking at innovation.
Well, I think you're mentioning all these key points that you're mentioning are, again, I just see the direct, tangible, like Microsoft as a company, you as an AVP teaching and learning for that organization, embodying these kinds of core principles of just education, of teaching and learning, because so you're talking about modeling effective behavior, right? It's not like I'm going in and I'm leading a workshop. If I said, how do you instill a culture of change? You could have said, as an external company, before we start work with any of our collaborators, we want a 3-day workshop on growth mindset, right? Like you could have said that, which is something that people do. But you were like, no, we have a way of working. We embody that in our daily practice. So that is habitual, that is automatic in how we work with people. So we model that when we work with folks. We also use language specific. We frame things, failures as, right? Innovation as. So you have a lexicon, again, internally automatic, habituated in an organization. So when you work with people, you're kind of you're bringing that and helping develop that language without needing to have a workshop about it. Demonstrating that commitment to community. Another thing that you're talking about around change management. So this is great. And now we're going to dive into some specifics around teaching and learning. But these insights around how Microsoft deals with the transformational process of disruption and change in large scale organizations, I think is really important to demystify. And you're also reminding me of a key point that everybody says to me, Elka, but when I get frustrated about systems change, and you're reiterating it again for me, which is the coalitions of the willing. Like, I really wish sometimes that I could get, like, maybe it's a teacher in me, where I want to get those who are really adverse to something. Like, I want to work with them, I want to be like, no, math is cool. Like, come talk to me about math, But everyone says to me, like, champions, Michelle, like, focus on the champions, focus on these coalitions of the willing. And I'm like, yeah, but what about all those people over there who are going to lecture at their students, Elka, and, use a learning management system as a repository for text-based resources? Like, what about all of them? And you're reminding me. Coalition of the willing. This is key.
Coalition of the willing is key. And, over time, eventually some of those that are a little bit more slow to embrace the opportunity will come along. And so, but it's that coalition that's going to be the fuel that enables it to happen, that works together to actually create something, to make that spark grow a little bit more. And that's really important. And we know this because even at Microsoft, when we think about, while we're bringing a bunch of new technology, new tools that empower people, we've had to figure out how to use them first. So we've undergone our own change processes, our own transformations in order to embrace those. So we know that it's not always easy. But it's important when you have a coalition, that then you have motivated individuals. Motivation, whether that's intrinsic or because they recognize that they need to use a new tool, or they need to embrace a new way of doing things. But that motivation then also means that they are willing to learn together. They're willing to figure out what works and doesn't work. And so they're then able to help their colleagues on that journey of learning.
And a fire is the perfect metaphor, because anyone who has ever made a fire, and I hope that there's really way too many people who have never made a fire, but anyway, survival skills team, let's get back into it. When you build a fire, you're not going to put at the beginning of a fire, you put small items that are flammable, tinder, right? I'm not going to put the soggiest, biggest log on top of a small spark, because it will just smother the fire. So right. It's a really good metaphor. I will remember it, Elka, I promise. Thank you for the reminder. Sometimes you just have to build the fire and then it'll catch. I want to just turn our attention to some specific things now, because you had a really interesting piece of research come out, conducted by the firm Fuse Insights, that looked at 500 teachers in schools across the country and the realities of the 2023 classroom. Yeah. And there were I'm going to pull some key words. Yeah. And I'd love to know more about how you're conceptualizing this with your collaborators, and how Microsoft is looking at addressing these kinds of key terms, because you want to help teachers create experiences for students that support inclusivity, engagement, and relevance. So you want inclusive, engaging, and relevant teaching and learning experiences. So pick one, talk about all three, whatever makes sense for you, Elka. But how do you see, because inclusivity in particular, and this idea of access, when we talk about technology enhanced teaching and learning, and we look at introduction of some of these intentional technological innovations, inclusivity, access, equity, that these can be important questions to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. So, a couple of things on that front. Let's start with the inclusion and accessibility because it's actually why I'm at Microsoft. I both of my own kids have learning disability, and it was when I learned about the Microsoft tools that really empower them as learners. I thought, oh my gosh, I need to be part of this because I saw how it removed barrier for them and it made learning no longer an enemy. And so you can imagine as somebody with a very thirsty mind who believes passionate about learning when an individual faces barrier, they move away from it. And that is a very, very sad moment. And so when I watched my own kids experiencing that and how much the tools enabled them and empowered them to really embrace their learning and get all of those beautiful ideas that they had in their minds out to be shared in the world, that's enormously powerful. And so, whether that's immersive reader or speech to text and text to speech tools that we have, OneNote's one of my favorite ones because it's so multimodal. It's everything from you can upload documents, you can have documents read to you, you can have your voice captured as you're narrating something. It also does speech to text and text to speech. Also enables inking. All of these multimodal ways that an individual can share their ideas, which is enormously powerful. But that's not where we stop. It's not just on those types of things. It's everything from if you have visual barrier that you're able to use our lens technology to take a picture of something or someone and have the software narrate to you what you are seeing or read a label to you. So you can imagine somebody with visual barrier, how much this empowers them in their world to even know when they're opening a can of soup as opposed to something that may be poisonous. So this is really incredible, as well as the adaptive controllers. So being able to adapt your computer so that if you have physical barrier, that you can now interact with your technology or use eye control or voice control of your computer. And in a digital world, this is enormously powerful and empowering for so many different people. So when we think about this then from just our regular use of technology, but again, imagine this from a learning perspective, that now when we can remove barrier and nobody's seen as different in a classroom, it's absolutely critical because of all of this, the human elements that go with experiencing barrier, the shame, the feeling different, being excluded, or being viewed as somebody that's receiving something that is special or unique, or being given a unique opportunity that is unfair. I've often heard that even that people with disability, when they do receive some accommodations, that it's perceived as an unfair advantage, which is horrifying. But these are the opportunities that when we think about, if we're able to use these tools, and as educators, if we can understand how to embed this and create inclusive learning experiences, this isn't just universal design of learning is now suddenly just table stakes. But then when we layer this with how do we design inclusion, where we design for the one and many will benefit, that's amazing. And so think about like universal design of learning would tell us that we should just, if one person needs extra time, everybody should have extra time. Well, that's actually not necessarily a good learning principle. That may actually create some boredom or some disengagement with other students. But if we are actually doing inclusive design, then we're able to create an experience where everybody has the experience with the learning that they need to have, that they need to thrive, which gets me then to personalization and engagement, because you can't have those until we start with those first principles of inclusion. And it's why I get super excited with what Microsoft has to offer, because I think it is just this opportunity for so many people now to engage. But then when I think about inclusion and what it empowers from an engagement perspective and a personalization, we live in an incredible era. Not only do we have these inclusion tools at our disposal, but we also have incredible AI tools. We also have collaborative learning environments. Like I love your comment about the LMS, that the LMS is not just a repository for documents, it should be a collaborative space. And, I often get told, Elka, it's phrased as a question often, what do you think of online learning? It's going to change everything. Well, holy smokes, folks, that's not really what the conversation is about. It's about collaborative learning and how do we empower that we now have digital tools that enable students, and I think about our Teams environment, students are able to now be anywhere and everywhere, and collaborating in real time with their peers and with their professors. I've watched one institution, Bow Valley College, actually have one of their faculty away and their students on site, leveraging the digital tools that they had on site that they needed to have access to, so they could create ubiquitous access. So students, regardless of their economic requirement, could access the technology that they needed. And their brilliant, talented faculty person was based in another city. Amazing to see that kind of flexibility in learning happen. And so then when I layer that with the opportunity of AI and the personalized tutoring or the personalized mentorship, and questions and answer bots that we can have, as well as translation tools that are available, there is now a wealth of opportunity to really engage students in some very powerful experiences that they otherwise couldn't have in the past.
And this all is the relevance, right? And I love that it's at the end, and people are going to have to tune in for the next episode with Dr. Elka Walsh, because artificial intelligence, you drop it like it's hot at the end, you know? But it is this idea of everybody who has ever listened to me speak ever will know that I'm a skills freak, right? So I believe that everything comes down to how we define and measure success. So if you're the same way when you look at a learning design, to your point, whether or not I'm providing, is a design in an inclusive fashion, which I couldn't agree more in terms of giving individual students what they need, not giving everyone the same thing. And is there an opportunity to engage specifically in things like collaboration, critical thinking, creativity, curiosity, imagination, experiential learning, all these things? These are the relevant skill sets. And I couldn't agree more that artificial intelligence and platforms like those offered through Microsoft are a gateway to the development of some of the most relevant skills for today, but more importantly, for the unknown tomorrow. Because ironically, I think you and I are on the same page that people view at times technological integration in higher education settings as being adopting a trend in automation and reducing the human component of teaching and learning. And what you and I both know is that technology can be a gateway to provide increased levels of access and opportunity to develop relevant skill sets that include incredibly human capacities. Like the use of AI in a large enrollment first-year course could actually enable a professor for the first time with 500 students to engage in a personal way with students who need targeted support on certain elements of their curriculum.
Yeah.
Like there is an opportunity in those same large enrollment first-year courses to provide valuable, formative feedback to students who are usually pre-AI or pre some of these technological tools, only ever experiencing a midterm and a final exam.
Yeah.
So we know that technology can be a pathway to becoming and promoting the versatility and value of us as humans. Yes. Not succumbing to some sort of a mantra of automation is the best way to go. So I am so grateful for this first conversation, Elka, the first of what is hopefully many.
I love this.
Yeah. Wasn't enough.
Not nearly enough. And I'm so glad that we're going to end on that idea of humans at the center for AI, because the technology is a tool. And I love that you've positioned it that way, because that's just it. And with the humans at the center of it, utilizing these tools, now the creativity is possible. And I love too the positioning of professors. This is about the opportunity to empower yourselves to actually do what you want to do with your students. And so we finally have tools now that enable us to do that. So I hope for another conversation where we can dive in even more deeply on this. And what does responsible AI look like then, especially for higher education, as we build out what our society can look like, and how we empower each other.
Absolutely. Stay tuned, everybody. But for now, I am so grateful to have you as a colleague and in this as a compatriot on the battleground of systems change as we continue to work with higher education and technological integration, Elka. The world of systems change is lucky to have you. That's for sure. So thank you so much for sharing your valuable insights today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Michelle. I really appreciate it.
The Education Revolution podcast is produced in-house by community members, and I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Sangera. Thank you for listening to this week's episode, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and head over to my website to opt in for my newsletter for more ways to connect with some of these big ideas.